This is the Tea on International Arbitration with Gaela Flores and Nicole Silver. Nicole is the U.S. Head of Operations and Lead Underwriter for Ignite Specialty Risk, and I, Gaela, am a partner and the Global Co-Chair of International Arbitration at Hughes, Hubbard, and Reed. Both of us serve as committee chairs of the D.C. International Law Community. And today, we welcome you for a bit of Mexican tea, as we look into a topic that has been brewing for more than a minute: Mexican judicial reform. Now, you might ask, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with international arbitration? Well, because, my dear listeners, you are a very informed bunch. I am sure you already know that the answer to both of these questions is a lot. But just in case you may have had something else of monumental and international consequence distracting you over the past weeks or months, here is a bit of context. In September of this year, Mexico promulgated judicial reform at the constitutional level, which, among other things, requires over the next 3 years that all judges in Mexico, state and federal, be elected via popular vote. Let me repeat, all judges in Mexico, that's approximately 7,000 judges, will be subject to popular election. This includes Mexico's Supreme Court. As you can imagine, this type of sweeping reform has caused a reasonable amount of uncertainty in and outside of Mexico. And this is the part where international arbitration comes in. Uncertainty in any given country's judicial system tends to increase the popularity and use of international arbitration as an alternative means to resolving conflict. I trust the connection and relevance to our world is now clear, and why this is some serious tea.
To help us with this complex topic, I am pleased to welcome our special guest host today, one of Gaela's partners at Hughes, Hubbard, and Reed, Diego Duran de la Vega. Aside from his impressive experience in litigation and arbitration, Diego is also a licensed attorney in both the United States and Mexico. He is thus uniquely qualified to be speaking on today's tea topic. So, Diego, would you like to introduce our guest for today?
Very happy to. Thank you, Nicole and Gaela. It is great to be here, and I'm looking forward to diving into this topic, particularly given the special guests that we have with us here today and my very personal nexus with the topic and the country, being born and raised in Mexico. So please allow me to welcome 3 visiting Mexican federal judges: Judge Angelica Ortuño Suarez, Judge Hilda Elizabeth Plascencia Carrasco, and Judge Marlene Angeles Tovar. Sus señorías, bienvenidas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I could start our questions off today by laying a bit of groundwork, I think I will direct this question to Judge Ortuño Suarez first. It's my understanding that the career path to becoming a judge in Mexico is a bit different than the path in the United States, where other than being a qualified attorney, there are very few formal qualifications for becoming a judge. So could you explain to me or to us and to our listeners the career path to becoming a judge in Mexico, and have the qualifications to become a judge changed with the recent reforms?
Yeah. First, I want to thank you for inviting us to this podcast. It's the first time for us to be in some kind of radio. Excuse me if I am kind of nervous with this. I'm not used to have a microphone in front of me. So thank you. I can explain what is a judiciary career just to become a judge. I think it's the same path for the 3 of us and for any judge in Mexico. We have a long-term career starting from a clerk. And after that, you can spend 5, or even I spent 10 years as clerk. Sometimes it's a little bit more. And you start doing exams. Those exams require really strict criteria just to pass the exam. Some of us are trying those exams 2 or 3 times before you become a judge. And of course, that does come from a long master's, diplomas, courses just to prepare, just to become a judge. It takes at least 10 to 15 years, and some of us are 25 years career or maybe a little bit more. So it's a decision of life. We start since we are young, and you know that you compromise with justice, and that's it. You know that if you do your work well, you keep studying, and you can become a judge. So the judicial reform changed that. What that happened with that system? You learn that you are independent. You are independent from inside and the institution. You know that there is a structure that holds you, all your job. Why? Because you know that all you have to do is just to resolve with the constitution in front of you, and that's it. So with that, that is changed completely. Why? Because the judicial reform decide that the judges need to go on voting. They need to make campaign, but it's a different campaign. It's a campaign that it's supposed to be not to be related with parties, and it's supposed to be to have no money. But that is not real. What happened with that? That opens the door just to the criminal pressure or to another kind of interest in the judiciary. And that is, I think that is the most dangerous thing that can happen. What will happen in those? We know that there are many places in Mexico that, unfortunately, I don't like to say that, but it's true, that are taken by the narcos. So, and we are talking about all judges. We have a different matters of sub-judges, like criminal judges, are civil judges, are bankruptcy judges, all topics. So imagine in areas that are that are taken completely in criminal cases. Of course, it's just a judge just to think that needs to go on voting, just to open life, just to see, oh, I am the judge, and this is my family, and this is my children. Of course, you are saying the criminal, where you are, I live here. That's crazy. So that's why we decide, and I think it's something I need to say, it was a women fight. Of course, we are right now here is not our leader, magistrate Maria Emilia. He has led us all the new judges because I am new. My colleague is older than me with more years, and we have different long career. But I think women, we have been brave. I think because there is influence about it's supposed not to be going on the streets, because we are on the streets. We are just asking for someone to hear what is happening in Mexico with the judiciary. Why? Because since 2018, a different path to become a women judge changed. Why? Before that, just 20% of all the judges were women. And we realized that there was a kind of gender difficulty with women just to become a judge. So since that time, the president of the Supreme Court in that time, Saldivar, he took different measures just to help us women just to become judge. And with that, since 2018, like 300 women judges, we become judges. And with that, it's about more than 40% of women judges in Mexico. Almost all of us have declined just to participate in the voting system. Why? Because there's no structure just to keep the independence in ruling. So rule of law, it's been attacked by the new system, I can say.
So in the older system, becoming a judge, you would normally have to select early on in your career.
Yes.
You would not be an advocate for many, many years and then become a judge, for instance, correct?
No, it's usually, well, there's different, we can give so many examples, but it is, for almost all of us, it's a young decision.
Okay.
Since we are in the school.
And now under the reformed system, are there still exams or no?
No, they changed constitution just with almost lack of requirements just to become judge. It's just to have a degree, just to have 5 letters of recommendation of your neighbors, and there is certain qualification on the subjects on the university. So that's why, in fact, right now, it's an average of 8 in the subjects that are important for become a judge, like the amparo subject. So with that, in fact, right now it's open, just the process just to apply to become a judge. And I don't know, ¿tienen los ositos? So the president and some other people, just there's in Twitter, you can find out. There is some cutest teddy bears saying that if you are young, you can be a judge. And the image is just too bunny. And of course, it sounds funny, but I mean, it's just to become a judge.
Yeah. So under the new reforms, all judges will be subject to a popular vote. Now, this is going to be a multi-part question, and we're going to ask you a number of questions, and it's maybe more of a rapid fire question and answer, because just thinking about this, it makes me think of a lot of just logistical questions. And so we'll see how this goes. If you don't know the answer, just let me know, because the last time Diego and I were in Mexico, which was maybe about a month ago, a lot of these questions did not have answers. So here we go. First, correct me if I'm wrong, but before the most recent reforms, it's my understanding that Mexican judges were appointed. Is that correct?
No, it's not appointed. We have a career.
But I guess, were you elected?
Mhm.
Okay. So you weren't elected. So I guess to me, that means you were appointed somehow.
Okay. Appointed by someone. There is an exam.
Yes.
So there is an exam, and in fact, it's 3 different parts of the exam. First, you make a general knowledge exam that it extend, and then you make a resolution in one day. It's just you go and they give you a case, and you need to do in writing, and then you have a severe panel exam with 3. There is one of the consejeros in the panel and the academy, another judge, and it takes like 1 hour exposing us.
So you would have to qualify through a series of exams.
Yep.
Okay, yes.
México ha tenido problemas en materia de justicia y corrupción. Hace 30 años se creó la carrera judicial. Esa es la diferencia.
Tienen que traducir.
Hi, everyone. So Mexico has had problems with justice, with the judicial system in Mexico. About 30 years ago, they created how judges would become judges in Mexico. They had to go through what they call the carrera judicial, that would be like the training, judiciary training, specific training for the judges.
Sí, en el ámbito del amparo. El amparo en México es el único poder, son los jueces que sí tienen carrera judicial, a diferencia de los jueces estatales, de los jueces locales. En muchos lugares son designados por los gobernadores. Por ejemplo, yo estoy en Sinaloa. Ahí muchos de los jueces de los estados son designados por los gobernadores hace muchos años.
So he's making the distinction because there are like some states actually are able to nominate the judges, but they don't deal with federal matters. So federal judges that are the ones that review the amparo suits are the ones that have to go along and comply with the requirements for the judiciary to become a judiciary in Mexico.
Yeah, and just for clarification, the amparo is a very particular legal instrument in Mexico, maybe in other Latin American countries, but it doesn't really have an easy translation into the US or English systems. But the closest you could come to is essentially a constitutional injunction, an injunction sort of action for a constitutional purpose. So understood that there were certainly, there have been state judges appointed in Mexico. Let's focus on federal judges. the federal judges, so from what I understand, they had to pass a series of exams, and essentially you qualified. If you passed those exams, you qualified into the judiciary. Once you qualified into the judiciary, are those appointments or those positions lifetime positions?
Sí, buenas tardes. Quiero hacer la precisión primero que antes de 1994 también los jueces federales se señalaban, decidían quién iba a ser el juez sin tener que hacer exámenes.
Before 1994, judges were appointed. They didn't have to go through this exam process.
Sí, los jueces federales, igual que los jueces locales, y a partir de 1994 se creó la carrera judicial y entonces los jueces empezamos a hacer exámenes para poder lograr llegar a ser un juez federal.
Starting in 1994, judges had to go through all these processes to become judges by taking exams.
Solo los federales. Y actualmente, cuando uno ya pasa los exámenes estos, y ya lo nombran juez, a los 6 años revisan nuestro trabajo y decide un consejo si nosotros ya podemos ser ratificados, que ya nos den el nombramiento y seamos inamovibles.
Once the judges pass the exam and they work for 6 years, and after 6 years their work is evaluated. If they're approved, then they are appointed for life.
So one of the questions we had when we were in Mexico that Gaela was referring to were very logistical things. How is the actual election going to work? And we're going to get a little bit into it. You may or may not know, because there may or may not be already regulation about it or laws that defines what's going to happen specifically. We're still in the process. This is still very, very new. Again, we have to remember that this is a constitutional amendment that took place in mid-September. And so a lot of things have been happening, along with disruption in the federal courts, strikes. Even I understand that there was some sort of episode at the locale of the Senate where a session got interrupted by, let's just say, people that were not happy with what was going on. So all of this to say that a lot has happened in a short period of time, and we're still processing and digesting what this all means. But going into the specific logistical aspects, which I think is going to also prove that this is not viable. One of those things are, once these candidates submit their application and they have what you were saying, they have a minimum of GPA, and they've done well in school, they have their 5 letters of recommendation from their neighbors. What happens next once they submit their application?
Lo que sigue es el caos.
She said, what follows is chaos.
Las autoridades encargadas de la implementación de la reforma judicial no saben qué hacer. El legislativo tiene comités en los que está poniendo a personas del partido político en el comité de evaluación. Forman parte de Morena los integrantes de los comités de evaluación del poder legislativo. En el ejecutivo igual hay personas que están muy comprometidas, que no tienen una aval, digamos, en cuanto a prestigio, a calidad en experiencia. Son ocurrencias. Las autoridades electorales están paradas, no saben qué hacer, necesitan muchísimo dinero para llevar a cabo las elecciones. En Ciudad de México, por ejemplo, estamos hablando... En Ciudad de México podría haber en 2025 1,000 candidatos y en 2027 otros 1,000 candidatos, o sea, 2,000 candidatos nada más en Ciudad de México.
So the authorities in Mexico have no idea about what to do. The legislative created a committee, but the problem is that people from that committee are members of Morena. Morena is the ruling party, and the president is from Morena, and they have the majority on both courts. And then the executive, they don't know what to do, and they are unprepared. Plus the agency in Mexico that is in charge of the elections, that it's the INE, they don't have the funds for it because it's very expensive. And now they have to be able to accommodate and keep the election of 1,000 judges, first 1,000 and then 2,000 judges, only in Mexico City.
So if I understand correctly, once these judge candidates submit their applications to become candidates and be elected to judges, there's these committees, one per each branch of government, right? One is going to be a committee put together by the executive, a committee by the judiciary, and a committee by the legislative power. And what you're saying is that the committees from the legislative and executive are a mess. The people they've been selecting have no business being there. It's entirely political. That's pretty much what you were describing, right?
Sí, y solamente tienes que ir a presentar tus documentos y ya con eso eres candidato. Tus documentos son los que se van a evaluar, se van a revisar, no te van a hacer ningún examen. De ahí, si hay muchos candidatos, van a hacer una tómbola. Esos son los que tienen que irse a una campaña.
Wow.
To become a candidate, you just have to present your paperwork that meets the requirements. Then you don't have to present any exams or anything. And then if they have a lot of candidates, then they just have to, they can get elected by luck.
A raffle.
By a raffle, yeah.
Well, just particularly for US practitioners. So to be a lawyer in the United States, you need to pass the bar, which is a pretty famous exam. But in order to be a judge, you don't have to pass any more exams. In order to present your paperwork, presumably you have to be a member of the Mexican bar, correct? No? No. Oh, okay. But you do have to have a licenciatura, a degree, just a licenciatura.
Maybe I can, maybe you wanted to clarify about what the bar?
Sí, en México no existe la barra. Sí hay barras de abogados, colegios de abogados, pero no es necesario que un abogado cuando termina la escuela tenga que pasar un examen de la barra. Simplemente hace su examen profesional y ya tiene su título.
In Mexico, we don't have like the Mexican bar. There's nothing like a national bar or anything. So you just have to finish your studies to become a lawyer in Mexico.
But she said, but you do have to pass your professional exam. What's that?
Es el título, es un examen final con sinodales como...
It's a Juris Doctor.
Only.
Oh,
It's a final exam by the law school.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it relates to
the
law.
last test.
But I want to clarify that it's up to every law school to set what are the requirements to graduate. So some law schools will require you that final exam, but other law schools no.
No.
And are law schools like they are here? Are they some better than others? Okay.
Es muy triste la situación de México, porque aparte hay muchas escuelas, les llamamos patito, o sea, no son de calidad. Hay 1000 escuelas, no se garantiza una formación profesional de calidad. Esa es la realidad de México. Tiene problemas, se debe de ir hacia la colegiación obligatoria para que los obliguen a hacer exámenes a los abogados, pero eso no propone la reforma judicial, por ejemplo.
We're under a very sad situation because we have law schools that they don't provide or they don't educate lawyers appropriately. They have like poor quality lawyers or poor students. So unfortunately, we should go and we should have and make a requirement for all lawyers in Mexico to be barred, but we don't have it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Can I ask just a new question? So with the new reforms, when is the voting supposed to actually start? When is this reform being implemented?
One is June 2025, and this is the half. And it was a raffle just to that determine that the numbers, our name was in the list with numbers, and the non-nest par. How do you par and no?
odd and even.
Exactly. Exactly. And just
Okay.
so that's the half. It's just we are going in a raffle in 2005. That was decided. I am going out in 2000
In June 2025.
2025.
And
Yes.
and there are 7,000 judges total who need to be elected. Are there going to be 3 different elections? Is that right? Like June and then when?
2027. But it's in federal. Right now, we are going just with federal judges. That
Okay.
we are 1,700 judges,
Okay.
and there is more like 5,000 judges in state judges. But that is different because since they don't have the career, and all the states that are controlled by the Morena party, they are kind of agreement between the local Congress with governors and the judiciary that they will just pass the actual judges through the no voting. I mean, there's some cells in the states.
But am I right in understanding? Okay, so just about the federal judges, are there going to be 3 different elections over the course of two
Primero,
elections
es que-
over the course of 3 years?
Es que primero,
And 3 years, yeah, well, just
de los 1,700 jueces federales tuvieron que, como al inicio proponían que absolutamente todos salieran al mismo tiempo y que todos fueran electos por voto popular. Como fue un escándalo que al mismo tiempo los 1,700 salieran, entonces dijeron, bueno, la mitad salen en 2025 y la mitad en 2027. Pero para decir quiénes iban a 2025, hicieron una tómbola.
So from the 1,700 federal judges that we have on the system, the initial reforms proposed to take them all out so they could all be elected. But then they realized that that would create more chaos. So then they decided to divide them by half. So half of the current judges have to go out on 2025, in June 2025. And then the other half is going in 2027. But the way they decided who's going out in 2025 or 2027 is through a raffle system. So depending on your last name, that's how you were selected.
Yeah, it's just a number. Just
Depending whether it was an odd or even number that you got.
Perhaps based on whether or not you can drive on a given day in Mexico City. Then,
Yeah.
for people who are familiar, whether or not you can drive on a given day in Mexico City is decided by how your license plate ends. So it sounds kind of like a similar.
Yes.
Congested.
Yes, yes, that's to keep pollution down. Okay, so that's just federal judges. I don't know if I want to get into this, but what's going to happen to the state judges? Do we know?
It will depend on each state. All the states that are controlled by Morena they will determine through the local Congress what is going to happen with the judiciary. There are some states that maybe they will go and really voting if they can, but up to now, for certainty, we don't know. Each state will determine.
I'm interested in this next question. I was thinking about this last night.
No, and I remember we discussed it when we were in Mexico. We were
Yeah.
kind of like thinking about how this is going to play out. And it is, again, about the elections. Who's going to vote for who? If I live in Mexico City, which judges will I be voting for, both federal and state? How do you have a sense? Is there any information as to how this is going to work out?
Well, the ballot for federal elections in judges, in some cities, in big cities like Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, they are thinking that they will have like 1,000 candidates in one list, and there, if you are going to vote, you will need to write the candidate you are proposing in the other line, and they make an essay just to how is this going to happen, and it takes like hours,
4 horas.
just to 4 hours just to looking and filling the bullet.
Okay, well, Marlena, you live in Sinaloa, right?
En Culiacán, Sinaloa.
And,
Imagine,
and,
in election. It's
and does that
crazy.
mean
O sea,
that at the moment, if I live or if Diego lives in Mexico City, I could vote for someone in Sinaloa? No. Okay, only the federal judges in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sí,
That's the
sí, cada quien, porque estamos divididos en circuitos. Entonces, en cada circuito, son parecidos a los estados. Es parecido, pero se llaman circuitos y abarcan diferentes áreas en el Poder Judicial. Entonces, las personas que pertenezcan a ese circuito son los que van a votar por los jueces de ese circuito en cada uno.
So Mexico's judiciary is divided by circuits. So depending on your circuit, that's where people living in that circuit will vote for that specific judge.
That's the problem right now with the INE. They don't know how to.
En mi caso, la gente de Sinaloa tiene que votar por mí. Si quiero, tengo que ir a hacer campaña en Culiacán, Sinaloa, en Los Mochis, en Mazatlán, con la situación de inseguridad, con toda la situación que a mí me tocó ya Culiacanazo, me tocó la detención del Mayo Zambada, o sea, El Estado sigue en una situación inestable y obviamente pues no voy a ir a elecciones porque o sea, ¿qué te arriesgas a perder la vida?
In my case, I am the judge in Culiacan, and then right now there are a lot of narco going on there. There's where something called Culiacanazo is called that when they detain one of the narco leaders in Mexico City. So in my case, I'm not going out for an election because I would be dealing with narcos, and it's very dangerous there.
So what's going to happen? I mean, if you don't go out, or if you don't put yourself up for election, or even if you do, what happens to all the judges who are currently serving their terms?
En mi caso, destruyeron mi carrera judicial de 22 años. Se acabó. La destruyeron por una tómbola. Lo único que me queda es luchar por México, por las instituciones, por el Estado de Derecho. Por eso estoy aquí.
In my case, after 22 years of my professional career, they just ended it. So the only thing I have left is to fight for the institutions in Mexico, for the rule of law, and for the rule of law in Mexico and the justice in Mexico.
And I guess to clarify, do the reforms force all currently serving judges out?
Yes.
Like not one currently serving judge can continue without being elected. Is that correct?
Son dos procedimientos. Digamos, son dos procedimientos que se juntan. El primero es cese. Te sacan sin motivo justificado. Te cesan por el solo hecho de que ellos dicen combatir la corrupción de esa manera, sin que se haya hecho una evaluación objetiva sobre tu trabajo. Te cesan, punto. Si quieres ir a un nuevo proceso de designación que va a ser mediante el voto popular, dicen que te dan el pase automático y tú tienes que competir con los candidatos del poder ejecutivo y el legislativo. Si son muchos candidatos, hay otra tómbola y si quedas como finalista, ya puedes ir a campaña.
So there are currently two proceedings. The first one is if you're a current judge, they will terminate you without evaluating your work or the quality of your work. And then if you decide and you want to try to aim to continue to be a judge, then you have to nominate yourself to become a candidate. And then you have to compete against the candidates from the legislative system and from the executive system. And then if are a lot of candidates, then it will be decided through a raffle.
I just want to go back to what Judge Marlene Angeles Tovar was saying. I really want to emphasize it. It's because we've been talking about the implications for the U.S.-Mexico relationship of the judicial reform. How is it going to impact of foreign direct investment? We've been looking at all the macro things, right? But this really resonated with me. The way you said it, I felt it. I mean, in the way you express it, and this equates to 1,700 other judges, and just the federal ones. I'm not talking about the whole 7,000 judges, which is they're terminating your career, the career you've had for the past 20, 25 years in an irresponsible decision, which I think this is. They just ended it. And now what? That you're supposed to do what after you devoted your whole career and life to a judiciary service career?
Yo estoy destruida por dentro. Si me ven aquí de pie, es porque amo a mi país.
I'm destroyed from the inside, so if you see me here standing, it's because I love my country.
Is it the same impact, do you think, on judges who do criminal law versus civil? Or is one worse than the other? I mean, you mentioned that, you can't go out and be elected in your city because it's too dangerous for you because of the narcos. So is there a greater impact on judges who do criminal law versus civil law, or can you draw some distinction there?
Todos estamos iguales, todos estamos cesados, acabaron con nuestras carreras, mujeres y hombres, mujeres que es más difícil para nosotras llegar, a todas nos terminaron la carrera. Algunas estamos más grandes y ya es menos la posibilidad de trabajar en algún otro lugar, otras más jóvenes y la situación es que 6 años estuvieron diciendo que nosotras somos corruptas. Todos los jueces federales somos corruptos y tenemos que salir del Poder Judicial porque así se va a acabar la corrupción en México. Y eso nos ha golpeado más, porque si nosotras quisiéramos, porque creyéramos que es buena la reforma y quisiéramos que nos eligieran, la gente ya sabe que le cree al Ejecutivo y ellos creen que nosotros somos corruptos y nunca nos han iniciado un juicio, un proceso para demostrar esa corrupción.
This reform is affecting all equally, but I think it's affecting more women. It doesn't matter if it's older or younger women. For the past 6 years, the president has been telling everyone and like all the citizens in Mexico that we are corrupt. So now the people believe the president. So they believe that all of us are corrupt. However, they've never even initiated any administrative proceeding or evaluated our rulings. So that's why we are under a very unfair circumstance where they believe that we are corrupt, but they never prove that.
And why does that impact women more than men?
Porque las mujeres tenemos menos probabilidades de llegar a puestos altos en cualquier empresa, ahora como juezas. Es más difícil por el rol que desempeñamos en los hogares. Los hombres es más fácil que llegue, y como dijo mi compañero ahorita, hubo exámenes especiales para mujeres para que no compitiéramos con hombres y poder llegar a ser jueces. Entonces, por eso afecta más ahora a nosotras como mujeres.
It's more unlikely for women to aspire to positions of power, and that's throughout different like areas in life, because usually women we have our families and we have to take care of our families. And then when there was the judicial reform, there were specific exams for women judges that they were where we were only competing against other women, and that's why right now there were like the number of women judges increased. But now we have to go back and go into the system against everyone.
I was listening to the testimony that was presented before the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, which was happening maybe just a couple of days ago here in DC. And I believe one of your colleagues gave testimony before the commission. The state, the Mexican state, was given a chance to respond in that proceeding. And specific to the question of women and how this impacts women judges, I believe the state said something like the new system will somehow account for gender diversity. It was vague. I'll admit that, but they did say something along those lines. Has there been, to your knowledge, any sort of mechanism put in place to make sure there's some sort of gender parity or diversity? Okay.
El primer problema que yo veo es que somos actualmente alrededor del 30% las mujeres juezas y magistradas. Nos tomó años, 20 años, 30 años llegar al cargo y lo que logramos con la reforma es que nos cesen a todas. Entonces, la presidenta dice que es tiempo de mujeres, pero ¿y las que llegamos antes que ella qué pasó? O sea, ¿en dónde está la sororidad? Eso es lo que nos preguntamos. O sea, digamos, cualquier método de designación nuevo no debe, creo que, quitar a las que ya logramos llegar con muchísimo esfuerzo. El método que sea que se elija, no puede ser que una mujer quite a otras mujeres. Así de sencillo. O sea, así de grave se me hace lo que pasó.
Currently, 30% of the judges in Mexico are women. And now the problem is that we have now the president that is a woman. She says that it's the time for women. However, there's no sorority because she's not taking into account all the judges that were already there. And it cannot be the case where you just have one woman and take out a new woman or just a younger woman. So there's no sorority right now.
Y esto que dijo el Estado es falso. Cuando el Estado pidió una lista de todos los jueces federales, se entregó por parte del Consejo, que es el que nos rige, es nuestro patrón, una lista completa de todos los jueces y magistrados, incluyendo mujeres y hombres. Y estábamos por número en esa lista. Entonces, a la hora de hacer la tómbola, eligieron pares y nones. y no importaba si eran más mujeres o más hombres. Y realmente lo que resultó, fuimos más mujeres las que salimos primero que los hombres.
Y hay estados.
What the state Mexican state saying is false, because when they were doing the reform, they asked for a list of all the judges, and so they could start the raffle. However, as it turns out, the result of the raffle is, as you can see, is that now more women are asked and are going to have to leave their position now, and compared to men. So that in reality, the raffle affected more women than men.
Hay algunos estados en que ya no quedó ninguna mujer, o sea, en ningún estado de la República. O sea, o por ejemplo, en Sinaloa, en Culiacán, somos 8 mujeres y 6 salimos en 2025, las otras 2 en 2027.
There are some states where currently there will be no women judges. So, for example, in my state, we are currently only 8 women judges, but 6 of us have to leave now, and the rest 2 will have to leave the position in 2027.
Yeah, I think one important thing is to point out about voting. It's for women going to election and to open family. It can be kind of more rude because in Mexico right now it happened. In fact, the Consejo sent. We elaborate a list with the vulnerabilities of women and the daycare of children and or the elderly and the special situations. And they sent this special list to the Senate, and the Senate opened all the personal situation of all women. And suddenly, what you have in Twitter and in media, all the special situations about kids not taking care. So what it is important, I think, it's for women, it's going to election and to, if you don't have a certain framework, just to do a real independent selection, going with that, it could be more, I think, more difficult than for men.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that in the United States, there are many women who would understand completely the obstacles that women face when faced with a popular election. That is very plain in the United States, and it has been since 2016. In Mexico, however, you now have a woman president. What would you say to people who say, well, no, you have a woman president. People are willing to vote for women. People will put in Mexico, Mexicans will put women in power. Maybe not in the United States, but they'll put women in power in Mexico. What do you say about that?
Pues lo que importa son los hechos. A mí yo pensaría que la sororidad, las políticas a favor de la mujer se demuestran con hechos. Y no me parece un hecho que favorezca, en el caso de las juzgadoras, que nos quiten sin un motivo justificado.
What matters are the facts, and there's no sorority. So I think it's unfair that they are removing all the female judges without explaining or giving a real reason of why they are being removed from their position.
Well, and besides, we are judges, not politicians. So when we start our career, we didn't decide just to have this net that can send you to voting. No, we decide just to study and just to serve the Constitution, and that's it. So the thing is, well, is if the system change, the rules are changed. And I think a voting judge is not really how compromise with Constitution can be. So I don't know. I've been thinking about a lot about it, like a lot. Just okay, and so the other day with the Linus Justice, he said he was thinking a lot too, and I said, well, it's not. Yeah, it's true. It's difficult just to think about voting judges.
Pienso que si es tiempo de mujeres en el gobierno, no solamente son las mujeres del legislativo o del ejecutivo, también deberían de ser las mujeres del Poder Judicial de la Judicatura las que también sea su tiempo.
I agree that it's time for women, but it should be the time for women not only in the legislative or in the executive. It should also be the time for women in the judiciary.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think I want to switch over to the common theme, the common topic that keeps coming out, and I don't want to put aside the topic of women in the judiciary, but I do want to get to the topic that most people are focusing on when it comes to reform, whether they're in favor of it or against it. Supposedly, the Mexican state passed this reform to combat corruption. Now, there have been a number of criticisms leveled on the Mexican state for promulgating this reform, this constitutional level reform, from, it seems like, pretty much every US source, whether it's US ambassadors, US think tanks, US media outlets, right? And they're all saying this is going to guarantee not anti-corruption, it's going to guarantee full corruption, rampant corruption, even more corruption and lack of independence that we've ever seen before in Mexico's judiciary. But what really strikes me in all of these articles written by US, sometimes attorneys, but US sources, people who live in the United States and should be familiar with the US system, what I don't understand is how they have a platform to say these things when they know in the US system, yes, our federal judges are appointed, but many, I'm sure thousands of state judges are elected. Are they saying something about all of the state judges that are elected in the United States? And conversely, right now in the United States, yes, our federal judges, including our US Supreme Court judges, are appointed, but we are living in a world in the United States where there is corruption happening on the US Supreme Court in broad daylight by an appointed justice. When US sources are criticizing Mexican reform, and I understand the reasons why you are against the reform in particular, but I'm just trying to understand if you think that any reform would help with corruption in the judiciary. And I am not coming from the position to say, well, the US court system is not corrupt at all. I don't think that's true. I think there's corruption probably in every court system in the world. And I don't think that Mexico is immune from that either. I know that Mexico has been subject to a lot of criticism about corruption over the years. I know it's not the only one. But my question is, do you think that there's something about an appointment system, in particular for federal judges, that makes it more of a guarantee against corruption than voting?
Well, the commission, it says in some ruling, the Inter-American Commission, that they will not determine if is voting from appointed system is better or not, because constitutional systems needs to guarantee in any way just the independence of judges. I mean, this answer could be with committees of the selection of the judges, and then to have a frame just to have really independent campaign. But that is not happening. What we have now, it's that we have one only big party in the Congress, so that doesn't guarantee independence of the people that is elected from the committees, not from the president, not from the Congress. And of course, that led to just to interfere just with the decisions of the judges. So I think from a personal point of view, I don't like voting for judges, but I'm a lawyer and I cannot say from a constitutional point of view, being honest, that one is better than other, but I don't like it. So what we need is to have warranties to have independence in judges. And of course, in Mexico, there's corruption too. We need, of course, a reform, but that involves all the legal system, the police, the fiscal attorney, all the fiscal attorneys. In Mexico, that's the main thing in criminal cases.
The prosecutors.
The prosecutors. So it is, and in the judiciary reform, they didn't say nothing about it. What is happening with the prosecutors, the defenders, the career of the police? We don't have career for the police. There is no police that wants to go to the school and to have a police training and to want to belong to that. So that in Mexico, that doesn't happen. So I think that led us that one it's just corruption. It's more corruption in voting with no limits and rules and real state of rule of law that establish the limits of every party in the Constitution. Well, I think, I don't know.
Lo que yo veo es que Estados Unidos no tiene que ver con México, tienen un nivel de consolidación de las instituciones a otro nivel, o sea, miren sus ciudades, desde ahí el orden, o sea, la cultura de la legalidad, o sea, aun cuando tengan sus problemáticas, no tienen nada que ver México, o sea, los índices de corrupción sí son altos en México, entonces creo que en un país como México, un sistema como el que se propone de elección por voto popular no ayuda en nada. Lo que ayudaría es, por ejemplo, que entre la ciudadanía. Si hay dudas sobre los procesos de designación de los jueces, sobre el sistema de responsabilidades, que entre la ciudadanía a fortalecer, a vigilar. Creo que eso podría ser una solución. Organismos internacionales, de derechos humanos, observadores internacionales, creo que eso nos ayudaría.
So I think the US has nothing to do, and their system is completely different to ours. Here, even though you have your problems, the rule of law exists. And in Mexico, there is a lot of corruption. So I think the voting system will not help fight corruption. What would really help is getting the citizens involved in paying attention on what the judges are making. And that would really help. And also getting others involved, such as international organizations or other observers, so that they could see what is going on in Mexico.
Let's switch gears a little bit and get into this podcast topic, which is arbitration, right? So far, we've been hearing that, with the new judicial reform, it's going to be chaos, logistically speaking, but also there's going to be issues in connection with, the lack of quality of the work of the judges, because they're going to be inexperienced judges, most likely because of the, how broad and low bar is the entry to it. Potentially a lot of meddling by political powers as well, because of the whole campaigning and selection process by political bodies. The high risk of getting the narco and organized crime aiming for and craving for those positions to be, penetrate the judiciary. With that in mind, how do you expect this judicial reform to impact the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms? I'm thinking about mediation, arbitration, and also the way that the parties are going to try to contractually sidestep the Mexican courts in resolving their disputes. Have you thought about that?
Primero pediría su conciliación, su mediación, que nos ayuden a encontrar esos puentes para buscar un diálogo con el gobierno. Esos son los oficios de la conciliación, la mediación. Pero en particular, o sea, creo que sí se torna en una alternativa. O sea, desde hace tiempo se ha estado trabajando en la justicia, en los mecanismos alternos de solución de conflictos, precisamente para no saturar a los juzgados y a los tribunales. Esa es una forma de realmente quitarle presión al sistema judicial, que estamos rebasados con cargas de trabajo, no tenemos plantilla laboral suficiente. Es una forma realmente muy eficaz, muy efectiva de despresurizar nuestro sistema judicial.
So I think first of all, what we are looking, the judges, is for some kind of mediation with the current government that is making this decision. So we could just take use of that ourselves. But I think these alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, they are great because they actually help reduce the workload of the current judges, because the workload that we have is huge. So having these alternative dispute resolution mechanisms would actually help the judiciary in Mexico.
But at the end of the conciliation, you have a resolution that, and you need to go in Mexico, you need to go to make enforce that resolution to the other party. You need to go through the judiciary. So at the end, it will depend of a judge that they will decide if the thing that was determined in the resolution, in the arbitrary, in the conciliation on mediation, any system you decide, it's given by the rule of law in Mexico. So in that, it can be, there is a gap completely about the determination of that.
So you're saying there's alternative dispute resolution mechanisms have been on the rise. They help out the system a lot. So you see that that's just going to keep going and maybe even more. It's going to increase because parties are going to try, unless they want to abuse and take advantage of this really badly designed new system because they have political connections or they belong to the narco. Otherwise, if you're a normal citizen, the normal thing is you would want to stay away from the courts. Is that correct? And then you would want to navigate towards these alternative ways of resolving your disputes. Do you see that as the next?
Yeah, so I think from the point of view of private persons, that is a natural decision about what is happening in Mexico. If you have interest in resolving conflict and you see that the judiciary in Mexico doesn't guarantee just a legal resolution, of course you are going to take the arbitration. But at the end, you need to go through a Mexican judge.
Yes. And we've been talking a lot about this, and obviously there are ways to minimize your contact with the Mexican judiciary. So first of all, you include an arbitration clause. But then if you also want to avoid having to deal with the aspects that relate to the courts in connection with the seat of the arbitration, that you also need to take out the seat of arbitration from Mexico. You send it anywhere else. You send it to New York, you send it to Miami, Houston. But you're right. That only takes you, so far, because if the assets are only in Mexico, you have no other choice but to go to Mexican courts if you're not being paid by the award. You have to go to enforce the award in Mexico. So, but the bar, the lawyers we've been discussing, I'm interested in learning what you think or if you've heard about this, is we're starting to see very creative, out-of-the-box ways of also trying to minimize the instances where parties need to go to Mexico to enforce the awards. And that is also, a creature of contract. A couple of examples are liquidated damages.
Okay.
In the case that, for the lack of payment of an award, probably you insert, hey, if you, after a month, you lost the award, you don't pay it, automatically you need to pay an additional 50%.
Okay.
I mean, that's a way of disincentivizing or incentivizing payment. Another idea we've heard is you include, as part of the design, you include an escrow account abroad. So, an escrow account at a New York bank that is designed so that when the parties, one party after a month does not pay, you can automatically go and, you can access that money.
Yeah,
it may not be for the full amount of the award, but it's something. And again, it's about placing the incentives exactly where they need to be so that you can probably increase your probability of getting paid, but also avoid getting to a Mexican court. And it's sad. The game now, it's going to be, how do I avoid Mexican courts?
Well, of course, it's really sad just to hear about that. I'm impressed how creative you are, and of course, it's, well, for you it's good. I mean, you need to think about it and just to protect your money. That's natural that you are thinking about it. But I cannot say if there is a certain or warranty path just to avoid completely. And sometimes you will end in a Mexican court.
And I think that's absolutely right. There's no way to 100% avoid it.
And I think with that, we have our questions answered, although I'm sure we have many, many more. But one of the special surprises of today's podcast is that actually we're recording in front of a live studio audience. So I wanted to ask if anyone in the audience has a question they would like to ask. Please come up.
Hello, I'm Evan Cooper. I'm an associate with Gaela and Diego. I'm curious if there's any hope of overturning this constitutional reform, if there's a political effort to push this back to how it had been before.
Well, we still have procedures, amparo procedures, but there was an amendment on the Constitution that determined that all the processes will be finished without starting the reform. So we can say right now we are just waiting just to have all the internal procedures with no really hope. I can say no hope about having something. And we know, of course, that we can elevate this to the Inter-American Commission. Of course, it would take like 10 years, or I don't know how much time it would take. But it will be, I don't know if we are going to see it or not. But if this is ends with another reform or something, in 10 years, it could be good for democracy. Another scenario that I see is that in 2025, it would be so mess just to be in an election that they will need to do something. Just because in 2027, we'll have not only judges, it's the Congress, it's the middle of the Congress. So imagine voting for Congress and judges in 2027 and with the press of negotiations internationally. So in 2027, I think it could be, I don't know what is the scenario is going to be, but I don't have, I don't have a personal, I don't have really hope about this is going to be revoked, but there is a possibility since the scenario, it's a mess.
Can you talk a little bit about, and following up on to Evan's question, there have been some cases that have reached the Supreme Court about this, different parties asking the Supreme Court to review not only if the process of the reform was correct as per the rules of any constitutional reform, but also the substance. Can these things be amended? Are there things in a constitution that cannot be moved? For example, imagine a constitutional reform that ticks all the boxes procedurally, it's fine. But that reform says, okay, women, we don't want women to vote anymore. So we're back 50 years back in time. Procedurally, it was perfectly done. But the substance, kind of reform like that, be part of the Constitution? And that's the kind of question that it's been asked to the court. Can this judicial reform that is affecting in such a deep way the system, the balance of powers, the independence of one of the branches, can that be actually done from a substantive perspective?
Well, the resolution of the Supreme Court right now, they didn't study about really that. They just couldn't reach the voting in the Supreme Court just to go to the bottom of the subject. So if you tell me, in my opinion, of course, there's a lot of inter-American resolutions about that. This is a beautiful example about if what is happening if in any country or in Mexico we have that with the prisión preventiva. How do you say preventive? Will prison in advance before you are taken to court. That they will put more crimes in the constitutions just to not to let you free during the criminal procedures. That is an example. There was a proposition about criminal tax evasion that didn't pass, but they tried that put in jail and somehow to avoid taxes and determine that it is criminal. It's not quite clear, but it didn't pass. But it could happen. So right now, we don't have pronunciation from the Supreme Court in the bottom of the topic.
Lo problemático no es solo la reforma judicial, también es otra reforma que se llama de supremacía constitucional. Esa reforma dice que no hay nada en el mundo, ningún medio de defensa que se pueda intentar contra una reforma que llegue a vulnerar los derechos humanos, como el ejemplo que pones, de que le quitaran el voto a la mujer. Una ministra de la Corte dijo, pues entonces más bien tendrían que sancionar a todos los congresistas que votaron de esa manera, pero no habría ningún medio de defensa legal para hacer algo.
The main problem is that there is currently no mechanism against the reform that would be affecting the human rights of the people in Mexico. So unfortunately, right now, there's nothing more that we can expect.
I know that some people have been talking about the renegotiation of the U.S. What is it? USMCA? Yeah.
USMCA.
USMCA. And speculating that maybe through that renegotiation, the United States and or Canada could pressure Mexico to revert back to its old system or stop this judicial reform. I don't know if you've heard of that. I had read something recently that was kind of going down different guarantees in the agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico, and speculating, it is speculation, that maybe there could be some sort of negotiation. Have you heard of that?
Bueno, yo pienso que en relación con los tratados internacionales, cualquiera que sea, si tenemos socios comerciales, tenemos que respetar las cláusulas que hay en los convenios comerciales, por ejemplo. Así de sencillo, sea el país que sea. ¿Y por qué? Porque nadie nos obligó a firmar esas cláusulas. Si somos socios, respetamos nuestros compromisos y sobre todo porque están pensados en el bienestar del área, ¿no? En el caso de América, pues hay muchos convenios que buscan mejorar a través de esos convenios comerciales, mejorar la vida de las personas en la región. En particular a México, pues claro que es relevante para, por ejemplo, detener los flujos migratorios, para generar condiciones mínimas de subsistencia en las personas, garantizar, o sea, por eso a nosotros sí nos preocupa que se pongan en riesgo estos tratados comerciales. Lo que necesitamos darle es certeza a nuestros socios, certeza jurídica, que se respetan los compromisos.
We are signing parties of international treaties, so we have to respect what we have agreed upon in those treaties. So it is very important, especially if we have signed international treaties for specific regions where the main goal is to improve the lives of the people, because this could have impact, for example, in immigration. So we are very worried about this. We think and we should make sure that the international treaties are respected.
Sí, hay otra situación en esto que sí pensamos que pudiera tener algún impacto a la hora de revisar el tratado, el TEMEC, en esta reforma, porque pues va a afectar la independencia judicial, la seguridad, la estabilidad, el comercio exterior. Entonces, sí pensamos que pudiera crear ese impacto y que posiblemente pudiera revertirse la reforma, pero el partido en el poder está protegiendo todo esto. De hecho, está prácticamente desapareciendo el poder judicial porque lo está cooptando, porque ellos van a poner a sus jueces para que resuelvan. Ellos no quieren contrapesos, y nosotros como poder judicial, como somos independientes, nosotros si vemos actos que son en contra de la Constitución, nosotros no permitimos que ellos los realicen, y es por eso que ellos no quieren que ya el poder judicial sea independiente. Entonces, ahorita...
We think that this judiciary reform is really it will really affect international treaties, and because it's affecting the independence of the judiciary, it will affect the international commerce. So it will affect in different ways the relationship with other countries. The problem is that the ruling party wants to disappear the judiciary in Mexico because they don't want a balance of powers. We currently, the judiciary and the judges, we actually stop whenever they want to decide against the Constitution. So what the current ruling party wants to do is eliminate that. They don't want any balance of power, and they want to be the only ones making the decisions in Mexico.
Y esa es la razón por la que crearon esta reforma de supremacía constitucional, porque con esa reforma, si ellos crean otra reforma con la que no estemos de acuerdo, no tenemos ninguna forma de recurrirla y ellos pueden hacer lo que sea. Por ejemplo, ahora queremos que exista la esclavitud o la pena de muerte o algo así, entonces nadie puede presentar ningún recurso para evitar eso. Pueden violar todos los derechos de las personas como quieran.
That's why they made a reform to our constitution, making it the constitution is the supreme law of the land. And that's why they could decide anything about it. So whenever the Constitution is amended or changed, there's no resource or any mechanism for the citizens or for anyone to against that reform of the Constitution. So now they are actually making sure that they can make as many changes that they want to the Constitution without anything to stop them.
Okay, I take that. And also, I'm sure you will recall the many decades that the PRI was in power, correct? And federal judges were appointed when the PRI was in power. So I'm not sure how that argument balances. Yes, I absolutely understand the response to what the Morena party is doing right now to the judiciary. And I understand that you're saying they're basically taking over the judiciary so they can do whatever they want because they're going to have their people in the judiciary. But could you not say the same thing for all of the judges who were installed during the pre-decades? How do you respond to that?
Oh, well, I can say I was studying in 1995. I was in law school. And in that year starts a new composition of the Supreme Court and the judiciary as we know right now. And that was the end of the one-party system. So I cannot really say something that I know in front, like because I didn't see it. But as we were teach in the law school, it was like, okay, we have three powers and we have the judiciary and the Congress. But in fact, everything comes from the president, the presidentialism. So what happened before that, we don't have judges, almost not judges from that age right now. They could be like 60, 70, maybe 80. So it's more than 30 years with this new constitutionalism in the Supreme Court. And it is new. And it was a different economic context. It was an open economy that determined the constitution even of the Congress. We don't have a one-party Congress since 1995. It's more than 30 years. So we can not even remember what happened with that. It's like, oh, they died. But of course, on those times, it was corruption, it was there, and the appointment of the judges, it was there. But we built a different path in the judiciary, a strong judiciary just to protect human rights.
I'm going to have to side with the judges on this one, Gaela. The PRI ruled for over 70 years the country, and they did whatever they wanted because they were, on the driver's seat by themselves for such a long time. But we cannot deny that the last years of their rule, if you want to say it like that, we saw the strengthening and the build-up of important institutions like the electoral body,
Exactly.
in charge of organizing and the watchdog of elections, the federal judiciary with the change that the judge was referring to, and the creation of other bodies that deal with transparency, antitrust, telecom. The decision was to give them enough power and autonomy so that they would be protected. Now we see they were not enough protected because the current government wants to take them down. That's another show of wanting to harness all power. So you could see that evolution from the last couple of decades of the last decade of the PRI into PAN and then Morena. But I cannot recall in the modern history of Mexico where such a bold move was attempted, which is completely changed the way the balance of powers is designed in the country and really trying to pass from a appointment system to an election system with everything that goes around it. And this is seen as an attack to obviously the federal judiciary was not perfect. There was a lot of corruption. A reform was needed. It was just not this type of reform. This is seen and regarded as, by many, as more destructive than it is constructive. And it really doesn't regard very particular aspects of Mexican society, culture, and history, such as the prevalence and pervasiveness of organized crime and how it has penetrated every single aspect of our lives. And it also, you have to see that this reform is the third step of a big three steps from the AMLO government and the Morena government. And he even refers to them as Plan A, B, and C, because Plan A didn't work, Plan B didn't work. And so he had to come up with something called Plan C, which was, okay, then once we get the majority that we need, which is a supermajority to amend the Constitution, we're going to do it. And how do we deal with the only aspect that has been precluding us from doing exactly what we want, which is the federal judiciary? Let's get rid of the federal judiciary as we know it. And that's what happened earlier this year.
Words to definitely pay attention to, whether you're in Mexico or in the United States. Do we have any other Mike Haneke, my partner.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for coming and speak with us. In the American experience with elected judges, a big question is campaign finance. And even if there's not the reality of corruption, the perception of potential conflicts of interest or corruption, especially when re-election campaigns happen. And so I was curious, what is the role of campaign finance for the judicial elections? Are there limits? How is it policed? Or do we not know yet?
Se supone que no hay financiamiento público ni privado, que vas a tener 2 minutos para que te conozca el electorado. Ese es el promedio que están estimando. A cada candidato, 2 minutos para que te conozcan en los medios oficiales.
2 minutos en medios oficiales de comunicación. Lo que sea que eso signifique.
There will be no public nor private funding of the campaigns, but every judge will have 2 minutes through all the means that the government has about publicity. I guess un video.
No, it's not clear. It's not clear no one knows. They say we cannot do campaign. You can have finance from anyone, and they will control the media. So they will let you to go to the media, which the national media, the private media, we don't know. But with the amount of people going to election, it takes like 2 minutes just for everyone just to say, okay, this is me, and that's it.
So there's no signs or television advertisements permitted or anything like that?
No, that takes money.
Mm-hmm.
And the Constitution says it's supposed to be not financed for federal judges.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carter Rosecrans. I'm also an associate here at Hughes and Reed under Gaela and Diego. I guess my question's a little bit more personal. I understand the elections are coming up in just over half a year. None of you intend to stand for election, whether you're up in 2025 or 2027. I had heard mention of wanting to find another way to protect Mexican institutions. What does that look like? What's next for each of you? Should the reform go forward, of course.
Well, of course, it depends on each one of us needs to be resilient about it. We need just to restructure it. I think it will take a time, but I don't know, of course, but we need to do it. I mean, it's kind of difficult because we are so focused in some kind of procedure in Mexico and just protecting human rights from a certain point of view. So we think all about it, but well, I mean, life goes on, and we need just to. That's it. I mean, detachment. It's just. Well, yes, of course it's sad. We have cried. We have circles of women just crying, going to retreatment, and yes, that's true. That's true. We're doing a lot of things just to control damage, but. If this goes, what we can think is not in the short term. Of course, all of us, I think we are going to be committed just to protect rights in Mexico. I don't know somehow from point of view, I don't know how exactly right now, but I think we are going to continue.
Yo estaba encapsulada en el autódromo. Yo llegué a proteger los derechos de las personas, su derecho a la manifestación, a la expresión de las ideas. Creo que eso es a lo que me voy a seguir dedicando. No sé en dónde, pero me voy a seguir dedicando a eso, a luchar por los derechos de México.
Before we hear the translation of what Judge Marlene Angeles Tovar just said, I want to note for the record that she took out her phone and showed us a picture And I recognize this picture because this was a very well-known event a few weeks ago. This was the Mexico City Grand Prix of the F1, where I heard in the news, it was all over the news, that there was some judges and magistrates from the federal judiciary that took advantage of that very popular event and decided to go there and, voice their concerns and express themselves. And it was also very highly noted that the response from the police was very, very, the measures that they took were not warranted. And so the image that I'm seeing is, I see two judges, right? One of them is Judge Marlene Angeles Tovar. The other one is a public defender. And then there was another judge. And they're surrounded by, quick count, 100 cops. And they're trying to isolate them. And, this was highly criticized in the media.
While showing the picture, the judge said that this is what I have been doing and this is what I will keep doing. I will go out and I will go to the streets. I will fight for my rights, and that's what I will continue to do for now.
Sí, todas queremos seguir luchando porque México comprenda la situación que estamos viviendo, porque se piensa que somos solamente nosotras las juezas o el Poder Judicial los que estamos sufriendo con esta reforma, pero realmente la verdad el impacto no es directamente hacia nosotros, es directamente hacia todo el país. Entonces, por eso nosotros nos resistimos a quedarnos sentadas esperando a que pase esto. Queremos que todo México y todo el mundo se entere que la situación no nos está afectando directamente a nosotros, sino a los ciudadanos y a las personas que tienen empresas en México y los tratados internacionales como el TEMEC y todo, a todos nos va a afectar esta situación. Entonces, la intención de nosotras al estar aquí en Washington es apoyar para seguir con esta resistencia y poderles hacer entender a la gente que es una lucha por todos nosotros.
So we're here in Washington, D.C. just to make sure so that everyone knows that the real impact of these reforms, it will affect us as judges, but the ones that will be really affected by it is all the citizens in Mexico City. It will really affect the country, our country. It will also affect and have implications to our international treaties, to everyone who owns a business in Mexico. So we just want to make it clear that this reform will really have an impact to our citizens, and it is not just to us, the judges.
Si no somos nosotros los jueces y juezas de amparo, ¿quién? En México. O sea, nos queda eso, luchar por México.
If it is not us, the federal judges, the ones that are protecting the rights of the citizens in Mexico, then who will it be?
Are you thinking about filing a complaint before the Inter-American Human Rights Commission? Have you done it already? Are you waiting for?
No, we need just to the internal procedure just to be on that, and then we are going to ask the petition at the Inter-American. But it takes, the thing it's right now, we don't know exactly when we are going to end the internal procedure. I can say there are some things that it cannot, we don't know exactly when it's going to be ended. If the Supreme Court is going to attract all the procedures, if we are going to be in the appeal court, we don't know. But at the end, I don't know if it will take just 1 year, 2 years. We are going to end at the commission. Yep.
Y creo que lo importante de tomar en cuenta de los jueces que estamos aquí, de los jueces federales, los de amparo, es que nos dedicamos exclusivamente a revisar actos de autoridades, no de particulares, puras autoridades. Entonces nosotros somos el contrapeso frente al poder, nos corresponde limitar al poder. Entonces, esa es nuestra función, preservar la división de poderes, que exista un contrapeso que proteja a las personas de sus derechos humanos. Esa es nuestra labor y la seguiremos haciendo adentro, afuera, en donde sea. Eso creo que es importantísimo de resaltar.
I think what it is really important here to clarify and for everyone to be aware is that us federal judges, our main function is to actually stop and protect the citizens from every act of the authorities in Mexico. So we are the only ones that could actually currently stop the acts from the government, and we are the ones who actually guarantee and help guarantee the division of powers and the protection of the human rights in Mexico. So that's why it's our role is very important, and that's why I wanted to clarify what our function is and how this reform will really have a big impact to the citizens in Mexico.
All right, I'm going to close it out here, but I wanted to thank so many people. First of all, our guest host, Diego Duran de la Vega, and also especially our wonderful judges, Judge Angeles Tovar, Judge Ortuño Suarez, and also Judge Plascencia Carrasco. It was very inspirational. It's a scarily poignant topic. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from all the very wise words that you've shared with us today. And also, I would be very remiss if I didn't give a special thanks to Andrea Rodriguez, who acted as our impromptu interpreter, and we very much appreciate it. Clearly, I could not have done it. So thank you to the DC Bar, and to check out more of what the DC Bar committees have to offer, please visit dcbar.org/communities. You have been listening to The Tea on International Arbitration, and watch out for new episodes. And if you like this episode, please tell a friend and subscribe anywhere you access your podcasts.